All right, let's talk about something that's always humming in the background of our lives, whether we notice it or not, the economic cycle. It's this powerful, invisible force behind the booms and the busts. And once you understand it, you can go from feeling like you're just along for a bumpy ride to actually knowing the rhythm of the road ahead.
I mean, have you ever felt that whiplash? One year, it seems like everyone you know is flipping houses and making a killing in the stock market. Then next, all you hear about are layoffs and crashing prices. It feels chaotic, right? Well, these things aren't just random events or bad luck. They're all connected by the economic cycle. So what is this cycle, really? The most important thing to get is that it's not a crisis. It's not a sickness. The best way to think about it is like the economy is breathing. There's an inhale, that's the expansion, the good times, and then there's an exhale, that's the contraction, the recession. You just can't have one without the other. It's a natural rhythm.
Okay, to really get this, we need to do a little detective work. We're going to go back in time and look at the DNA of these cycles. Think of it like we're investigating the earliest crime scenes to figure out the classic playbook, the modus operandi of every bubble and crash since.
And believe me, this is nothing new. Not at all. As you can see here, from the very first days of modern finance in the 1700s to the big industrial booms of the 1800s, the pattern is just, well, it's identical. Easy credit gets pumped into the system, everyone gets excited about some new thing and speculates like crazy, and then, boom, the whole thing comes tumbling down.
Let's just break down one of the first and most spectacular bubbles ever. So this guy in France, John Law, had a revolutionary idea. He introduced paper money, and at first, it worked. It totally revived the economy. But then came the hype. He promised these insane returns from trade in the Americas, and people completely bought it. The frenzy got so nuts, the French literally had to invent a new word for all the people getting rich: millionaire. But of course, it was all built on nothing, and the collapse was just catastrophic.
And get this, at the exact same time over in England, a nearly identical bubble was happening. And even one of the certified smartest people in all of history, Isaac Newton, got sucked in. He invested early, made a nice profit, and got out. But then he saw his friends still making money and got greedy. He jumped back in at the top and lost an absolute fortune. His quote here just perfectly captures a key piece of the puzzle: human psychology. So, after looking back at all the evidence, we found our first major clue. The engine that powers every single one of these cycles is credit. Easy money. The invention of paper money and banks made it simple to create credit out of thin air, and that's the fuel for investment and wild speculation. But when that credit gets stretched too thin and starts to tighten up, the whole machine just slams into reverse. That's the core logic right there.
Okay, so we've got our big insight from history. Now let's see how that plugs into how economists think about this today. If credit is the engine, what are the actual gears and wheels that make the whole thing move? Well, it turns out there are a few key forces, a trio of cycles all overlapping with each other that create the rhythm we all live through.
So here's the crucial part. It's not just one cycle. It's at least three, all layered on top of each other. You've got the short kitchen cycle, which is all about businesses stocking up on inventory when they feel good and then having to sell it off when they don't. Then there's the longer juggler cycle, which is about big investments like building new factories. But the big one, the most powerful and honestly the most destructive, is that Kuznets real estate cycle. And when all three of these cycles happen to peak or bottom out at the same time, that's when you get the super booms or the really, really bad depressions, like 1929 or 2008.
And you have to layer one more thing over all of this, what you might call the emotional accelerator. Good old-fashioned greed and fear. During a boom, everyone's telling themselves this time is different, and that just fuels the fire. During a bust, it's pure terror, a sell-everything-now panic. These emotions don't create the cycle, but boy, do they amplify the highs and the lows.
And there are a couple of other drivers to keep in mind. Big new technologies like when the railroads were built or the internet took off, they create their own massive decades-long investment cycles. The economist Schumpeter called this creative destruction. And sometimes a tiny little event, like a few people not being able to pay their mortgages in 2007, can create a feedback loop that ripples through the whole system and triggers a global meltdown. The butterfly effect is very real.
Okay, that's the history, that's the theory. Now we get to the most important part. What does this all mean for you, for your money? How can we use this knowledge to actually navigate the waves instead of just getting knocked over by them? Think of this section as your compass. First up, stocks. You often hear the stock market called a leading indicator. All that means is it tends to move before the real economy does. So the market will often start to climb when the news still feels awful because it's looking 6 to 9 months into the future and anticipating a recovery. And it'll start to fall while everyone still thinks things are great because it's sniffing out trouble ahead.
Now, bonds are usually the opposite of stocks. They tend to do really well during a recession. Why? Well, think about it. When the economy is in trouble, what do central banks do? They cut interest rates to try and get things going again. And since bond prices move in the opposite direction of interest rates, lower rates mean higher bond prices. That's why they can be a safe place to be when stocks are falling apart.
And then we come back to real estate, that long, powerful wave we talked about. This 18 to 20-year cycle is maybe the most important one to pay attention to, just because it's so tied up with the banking system and with the wealth of regular families. It moves a lot slower than the stock market, but its impact is usually much, much deeper.
So, this is where it all comes together. This is the practical playbook. It shows how you might want to think about your investments depending on where we are in the cycle. So in a recovery, when things are just starting to get better, you might want to be overweight, meaning invest more in things like stocks and real estate. But when things are overheating and your cab driver is giving you stock tips, it's probably time to pull back on those and maybe look at things like commodities. During the contraction, long-term bonds are your friend. And then at the very bottom, you slowly start to buy those risky things again, getting ready for the next ride up. All right, so as we wrap this all up, I want to leave you with a different way of thinking about this. The point of understanding the cycle isn't to be afraid of the next crash. It's to actually appreciate the rhythm of it all and to find the wisdom that's baked right into the cycle itself.
I absolutely love this quote from Clement Juglar, that economist from the 1800s. It just nails the whole idea. A recession isn't some random accident. It's the direct result of all the crazy stuff, the dumb investments, the wild speculation that happens during the good times. It's basically the economy's way of doing a detox.
And that right there is the ultimate takeaway. You're never going to stop these cycles. They're rooted in how credit works and, more importantly, in unchanging human nature. So the smartest thing to do isn't to try and fight it or time it perfectly. It's to learn its rhythm, respect its power, and learn how to dance with it. Once you know the steps, you can move with a whole lot more confidence through every single part of this unavoidable economic cycle. Thanks for listening.